Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well on this New Year's Eve. I am here today to talk about the impact of trauma on our lives. And particularly, I want to talk today about our healing journey and how we can integrate that a little bit more into our tangible external lives. It almost happens quite naturally, the integration between our healing and our tangible lives. However, I think it can be really important that we actually understand that is happening. So I want to talk a little bit about a mindset change in regards to this concept. So that's going to be the focus today. As we go into sort of this really popular time for making resolutions and setting intentions and all of that, I want to talk about how that ties in with our trauma healing. And so I'm going to just kind of maybe shift your mindset a little bit in that regard today so that maybe you can go into this next year with a slightly different understanding of how this all works. Because I'll be honest, when we look at this through the controller lens, which we look at a lot of things through the controller lens, but when we do that, we tend to have expectations that are a little unrealistic. And to be fair, that's true of a lot of aspects of our lives. I mean, controllers do tend to have pretty unrealistic expectations about life in general, but they definitely do about our healing. And I will say, and sometimes those expectations are actually meant to throw us off this path because they don't want us on it anyway. But sometimes those expectations are just the natural kind of way the controller thinks about life. So what I want to do today is sort of debunk the controller myths around healing, but also give you a new way of looking at it, which hopefully can make it a little more tolerable to deal with the healing part of 2025, right? If we want to put it that way. I don't hype this whole new year, new me thing because I think that's just something we're doing all the time. And I think most of people who are here listening to me and tolerating what I'm saying are doing it all the time. So regardless of what year it is, it's just the way that we live. But if we can look at this a slightly different way, it may help. As you are focusing on your goals and resolutions for 2025, I just want to take a few minutes to plug a different approach. Again, as I said, it's a pretty natural thing that happens when we're on the healing journey, but understanding it can make things a little easier for us, especially on the expectation front. We don't heal the way the controller tells us that we're going to heal. And you might be going, okay, how does a controller tell us that we're going to heal? Well, I'll tell you, they tell us that there's a destination in our healing journey, and we're going to hit that destination, and then everything after that is going to be rainbows and unicorns, which, by the way, is just when I say that phrase, which I say a lot, I'm just really referring to the fact that all of a sudden everything is going to be glorious. We're not going to have any more problems. Life is going to be just always good. No negative emotions. That way of thinking about healing will really drive us crazy. And it goes along with how the controller thinks, because the controller believes, or at least maybe they don't believe it, but they want us to believe it, or they want the other parts to believe that there is a goal. And what the controller does throughout our lives is they keep moving that goal. As soon as you do this, you'll feel better. As soon as you do this, you'll feel better. As soon as you do this, you'll feel better. It seeps into our understanding of the healing journey as well, where it becomes, oh, well, you just have to reach this point and everything will be okay. Okay, now wait, you just have to reach this next point and then everything will be okay. And we can feel like we're chasing something that really isn't actually, it's not that it isn't there. Where we want to go, we can get to within reason, right? There is no switch that's going to flip. We're not going to one day wake up and go, everything is beautiful and everything is wonderful and, that's it. But as we heal, there will come a time where things feel a lot more tolerable and we can get through our days without major interruptions, right? Or we can sit with our emotion and it doesn't feel so overwhelming in our system. It's like things do shift, but they don't shift like that light switch. And they shift slowly, which controllers don't like. So those are the things we want to keep in mind. So I want to talk about another way of looking at healing. It's a way that, that I've kind of been thinking about healing over probably the last 4 or 5 years. I've really kind of seen it this way. So I want to talk a little bit about this approach. I like to see it as 2 ladders. We have these 2 ladders. Let's say they're up against who knows what. They're up against whatever you want them to be up against. But the ladders alternate. Their rungs alternate. And so we're not going to climb this like a normal ladder, right? We're going to take 1 step on one and 1 step on the other. And the way I see it is that one ladder is this healing journey. And the other ladder represents more of our external tangible goals, the ones the controller can get behind. These are the ones the controller always wants us focused on. However, the controller often doesn't agree with our most authentic goals because those will usually come with more risk than the controller's willing to tolerate. So, all in all, in the end, our controller probably isn't totally on board with either of the steps, but they don't always know that yet. So, let's talk about how this ladder thing works. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some examples. But first, I'm going to talk about it in theory, like how these 2 ladders are connected. Okay? That's what I want to talk about. And I want to say hi to Trish. So, what does this mean? To take 1 step on one ladder and 1 on another. Okay, so here's how it goes. And by the way, I always oversimplify things because this stuff is really hard to understand. And it really does help us if we can wrap our brains around it just a little bit. So, first step is emotional expression. Yes, that's true. We could sit here all day and argue just about whether or not that's the first step. And I have had plenty of people tell me that I am wrong. But I am here to tell you that the first step is emotional expression. I will not come off of that. No matter how many people tell me thoughts come first. No, they don't. Okay, so emotional expression is first. A lot of times that requires us to quiet our thoughts so we can connect with that emotion. That is true. But the emotional expression is the first step in the healing process. Okay. Next step. We will often get memories as evidence. And when I say that, I mean these memories are directly tied to the emotion. They explain the emotion, okay? The part that's really annoying is that we often feel the emotion before we get the explanation. So you're sitting there going, why do I feel this way? When I can't point it to anything in particular. So emotion first, memories as evidence comes second. The third thing that happens is our belief systems change. Okay, as we get these memories back and we process this emotion, our belief systems will start to change. Sometimes we're just peeling layers off an onion, so the belief systems are changing kind of slowly. Other times it can feel like you've just been hit by a ton of bricks because it's a very substantial change in the way you view the world. Both can happen. And those little layers are extremely important. Don't let your controller convince you it's nothing because they will try. So that's the third step. The fourth step is that we break a contract. Okay. When we break a contract, that's when pretty substantial changes start to happen in our external world. Breaking the contract is one of the biggest steps, in my opinion, in this journey. And most of the time, we don't see the contract until it is breaking. That's also very frustrating. It's kind of like processing emotion when you don't know what it's for. You will often get all the way to the point where the contract is breaking before you can really see it. You may have a sense of it, but you will really blatantly see it when it breaks. Okay. And the last thing is then we get clarity about something new related to our external path. So it's like there are sometimes I will sit there and spin my wheels. Oh, I'm still spinning my wheels on something as I continue to process memories. And then one day I will literally wake up and I'll be like, oh, I just need to do this. And it really can be quite a simple step. But before I did that healing work, I could not take it. I could not push through it. I know a lot of people out there say, force it, right? They're out there in their controller giving advice about how to meet your goals in 2025. And they're like, just push harder, force it. It doesn't work. If you've got a contract blocking your way, it's not going to work. It's why most New Year's resolutions fail in the first 2 to 3 months. We know this. They've done the statistics, right? Because they're all in controllers. They're all doing the statistics. We love our numbers, don't we? But it doesn't actually work. If we don't tie the healing work to the external steps won't hold. Okay? We might be able to initially force it, but we can't hold on to it for the long term. This is where the healing process, that one ladder, right? That one rung on the ladder needs to be taken to move that other one. That is really, really key to making change permanent. So what I'm going to do next is give you some examples of what I just described, because I'll be honest, if you've got a strong controller showing up right now, it's going to be hard to understand this. And I'll be honest, a lot of us do. So I'm going to talk about specifics, and I'm going to do this by breaking down emotions and specific emotions and how the expression of those emotions then will change our lives, quite literally. Now, again, this is not a quick process. This is not a switch that's going to flip. But gradually, and if you stay with it and you stay consistent with it, the change does happen. I see it happen with all of my clients. I've seen it happen so much in my own life, which is one of the reasons I teach this, because it just does work. My examples are going to go through the 5 traumatic emotions, okay? This is the way that I've broken down emotions to try to make it easier to digest and figure out what's going on in your system, because let's face it, that's hard to do. There are tons of feeling wheels out there. I find them to be a bit overwhelming because there's so many things on them. And you can have, 100 feelings associated with each one of these 5 emotions, but as I said earlier, I really like making things make sense. So I try to oversimplify a bit just so that we can take this in. That's really why I do it. It's not that I think that anything is this simple, but it helps. So I'm going to break this down into 5 examples, one for each of the 5 traumatic emotions as I see it, and I'll show you how it works. So the first example is anger. I almost always start with anger. There's a lot of reasons for that. One is it's my favorite emotion. And if you listen to me for a while, you already knew that. But also, in some types of personalities and some types of systems, it is one of the first things we feel. It's not always true. It was true for me. It's not true for everybody. Some people start with futility. But I will say that anger is present oftentimes. It's often what pushes us into this journey, because we're like, wow, I didn't know that was there until I just exploded over nothing. And that kind of brings awareness to it. So we'll start with anger. So I'm going to go through those steps that I talked about just a minute ago with each emotion. First one, anger. So we express anger. Now, for those of you who followed me for a while, you know that when I talk about expression, I'm talking about writing from those things, unless it's grief. If it's grief, you don't need to write from it. You have to sit with it. It's different. The other 4 emotions, you want to be writing from them, not about them. So we express the anger. That's step number 1. Then we start to get some memories as evidence of that anger. Those memories are likely about times that you have been mistreated by others. So we process those memories, we write them down, we write from the anger, and suddenly we start to get this sense that our beliefs changing, and we want to start setting some more boundaries, right? One of the best ways to get more in touch with the boundaries you need to set is in writing from your anger about not being able to have them. So as you ground that anger, your boundaries start to become more clear to you. I'm going to express my ungrounded anger. I'm going to get the memories associated with that anger. And then suddenly my grounded anger is going to start showing me where my boundaries need to be set. Okay. Now this is happening in layers, right? It's layers that we're experiencing this. It's not all at once. But then we start to connect with a contract. And maybe that contract says, I'm not allowed to have boundaries, or I owe someone something in some way, so I can't ever have a boundary with that person or anybody who reminds me of that person, which is often what happens. And then as we do that, we may start to get this sense of a new step we could take in our life. And that new step requires boundaries. And that new step may have something to do with setting some boundaries with others so that we can finally make time, let's say, for something very important to us. And, once we've gone through all those steps, we may get the sense and we may get enough strength to carve out that time for ourselves, to set those boundaries with others and carve that time out and do that thing that we need to do. So that's example number one that comes from anger expression. You may be sitting here going, yeah, I can see why you like anger. Doesn't that sound cool? Now, to be fair, all of these examples end with something cool. What I love about anger expression, it's really expressing our self-love. It's saying no more of this. No more of this constant invasion of our space. We're going to take life back and we're going to do what we want with it, right? That's the idea here. The next example is futility expression. Now, I'll be honest, I hate futility expression. I have a big problem with futility. Futility and I are not friends. It doesn't mean I'm not friends with my karma kid, who is usually the one expressing it, but I just don't like this emotion. It flattens me out. It makes it very hard for me to be productive, which you may have gathered is something I really enjoy being. So I'm not a huge fan of futility, but I have learned that I must express from it, especially if I don't want it to take over. Okay, so futility is a critical expression point, and futility is going to sound like depression. This is hopelessness, right? There's no point. There's no point. And there is nothing that gets in the way of our movement forward in life more, in my opinion, than futility. So when we are expressing futility, we are also going to have memories as evidence. And those memories can often look like broken promises, betrayal, times where we were just about to do something cool and then it all just fell apart, right? That's what drives the feeling of futility. It's like, I've been here, I've tried this, and it just doesn't work, right? So we need to process the memories associated with that. Now, the next thing is our belief systems. Our belief systems with futility can be pretty significant as far as the changes go. For one example, I'm not going to wait on anybody's permission anymore. I'm not going to let people stand in my way. That's one of the things that can come up when we process the futility, because the futility is often based on the fact that as children, we were really unable to do things without, we didn't have the power. We didn't have the power to just make things happen. That's changed now. But until we process that ungrounded futility, it's really hard to understand that or believe that. That belief system that's going to shift is going to say, no. I can actually move forward with it. I can do this. I don't need anybody to give me permission. And I don't need, I don't have to worry about people stopping me because they have more power than me. Don't get me wrong. People will always try to stop us if we're going after our dreams. But the difference is they don't necessarily have the power to do that or really have the power to impact us significantly at all. We don't understand that when we're in the karma kid futility, but that's the belief system that can start to shift as we do. A big contract that breaks is one I'll refer to. It can show up in a lot of different ways, but I'll refer to it as my life is not tied to others any longer, right? So the contract is my life is tied to others. When that breaks, we can begin to take steps in directions that maybe when we were children, we were thwarted from taking. And I will say that a lot of times when it comes to gift expression, we will find those. We will find those places where we were told we could not do the thing that we want to do. So that is huge for us when we can express like that. So what Carol is saying, my controller in Karma Kid had me sitting in futility and denial after a big grieving session. I had a sense of the memory, but could not get off the couch until I wrote from it. I'll tell you, this is what happens. It happens to me all the time. It's like the futility is going to stay there until we can drive past the futility enough to write from it. Because futility is a hard one to write from. Because the whole notion of the futility, the whole message behind the futility is don't do anything. And by the way, that will include writing, right? So that's a really, really tough one to get past, to get the writing done. But I can tell you that it feels almost magical when that futility has been written from, the way that we can shift out of it. It's truly saved my life. That is not an exaggeration. I probably would have spent most of the last decade in depression had I not learned this. And Janice saying, love hearing anger is an expression of self-love. It is. It really is. We need to give it a new reputation. We really do. It has been stigmatized long enough, right? So now I'm going to talk about shame. Shame is a biggie, and shame also comes from Karma Kids. So Karma Kid holds some tough emotions for us, but it's because they also have experienced some of the worst trauma and the worst memories associated with our trauma as well. So when we express from the shame, again, writing, anytime you hear that self-loathing critic come up in you and tell you, you are not worthy, you will never, who do you think you are? That's one of my personal favorite shame expressions. That's your shame talking. That's your Karma Kid. Okay. So we want to write from that. As we write from shame, we usually find that there's a memory or two or three or four as evidence of that shame. Oftentimes, the memories associated with shame are experiences where we've been blamed for something or told that we're no good. Usually it has to do with abusive behavior by abusers, and they're blaming that behavior on us. Okay, so that's what the memories often are. The belief system that shifts when we get these memories back is, oh, heck no, I wasn't to blame for that, which is one of my favorite belief systems to shift, by the way, because while we may already know in the frontal lobe that we're not to blame for this stuff, most of the time, deep down inside, we're still doing it because the Karma Kid is sitting in the unconscious with those beliefs. So when we write from that yucky shame, we do start to get these beliefs to shift for us. So what is the contract we often break as we come out of shame is that I'm not like these people. That's a big one. I'm not to blame for what they did, right? And I won't keep upholding their story or their reputation because I feel like I'm to blame for it, okay? Big contract here. Huge. And oftentimes that leads to us being able to speak our truth, okay? So, again, huge step. Doesn't necessarily mean that our gifts have to be tied to speaking our truth in some way. Obviously, from my personal journey, that was true, but it's not true for everyone. But oftentimes when we speak our truth, we also can speak in other ways that we need to in order to do things that really matter to us. So it's all very tied together. And truly, if we think we're not worthy of a good life, we will struggle to have it. So this shame is so important to break for us. So those contracts need to go. I'm going to run a little over today because I want to talk about the last two examples here. And, that's okay as long as you have the extra time. If not, please do come back and view the end when you do have time. So the next one, fear expression. Huge, right? There is not just one part that holds fear. There are many parts. Inner children can hold fear. But we often attribute most of our fear to them when we actually shouldn't, because our defenders are loaded with fear, just loaded down with fear. Fear is their most foundational and number one emotion. And a lot of the fear we feel is actually them when we are in this recovery work because they're very, very scared of it. Expression of fear can look like saying things like, I don't want to feel that emotion, that other emotion, or I don't want to connect with those memories, or if that's a bad idea, I don't want to do it, right? Like it's very much the resistance to healing, also the resistance to expressing our fullest gifts as well. So writing from that does have a tendency to bring up memories. The memories around fear will often be highly threatening memories. times when we have been threatened. Remember, if you think you've never been threatened, well, just hold out the possibility that there may be a memory in there of when you did experience something like that. So the belief system that can change as we get these memories back, the biggest one, I don't have to be scared of them anymore, right? It can take a while for that to shift because as children, you were probably pretty darn scared of these people. So shifting out of that is difficult, and we have to kind of recalibrate the power dynamic between us and the people who harmed us. They aren't as powerful as you think. Most of their threats, especially in your adult life, are empty, and we can call their bluff. And I often do that, I will say, with the people who threaten me. But it takes some time to get there. We need to let the fear express itself as much as it needs to in order to shift out. And this includes physically. All emotions do have a physical expression to them, but the writing helps us to get there. It helps us ground enough to be able to physically express those emotions. And you might not be surprised that fear often shows up as shaking, and it's okay to let that happen. It's quite necessary. The contract often associated with this is I don't have to keep my life small anymore. I don't have to do what they say. So what that does for us, you might not be surprised to hear, is it opens us up to some really cool opportunities in our lives where we don't have to stay small anymore. So therefore we can take steps that make us maybe more visible, more noticed, and really putting our gifts out there in the world the way that they should be. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everybody who expresses their gifts has to be famous or something. That's not true. But it allows you to get the visibility that you might need in order to do the cool thing you're going to do. Lastly, we have grief expression. And as I mentioned earlier, grief works a little differently here. Grief is often tied to a theme, not as much. We're not going to necessarily get as much evidence back for the grief because grief usually happens after we've processed a series of other memories of other emotions. I think all emotions lead to grief, right? Not as a final destination, but as a part of the cycle. And so as we grieve, we are in a letting go process. Okay. What are we letting go? Well, that can be a whole lot of things, but one of the biggest belief systems in general that we are going to start to shift as we grieve is that we're no longer going to wait for others to do the right thing. Because one of the biggest belief systems we have that holds us back is that we're hanging out, right? Waiting for people to come and save us or tell us they're sorry or unbreak the promises that they've broken before, right? That's what we're looking for. And a lot of times we don't even know we're looking for it. We're just holding on and we don't know why. It's very unconscious to us, but the grief helps us to let go of what we thought we needed to move forward. So that's a big contract that's breaking there, right? I'm no longer going to tie my life to someone else's actions. Huge, huge. Doesn't get much bigger than that. Grief is so incredibly transformative for us as an emotion. And as we let go of those ties that our lives have to other people and them doing the thing that we think they have to do, we can save ourselves. We can begin living our lives the way we want. We don't have to wait anymore. And that's what grief expression brings to us. So the next time you know you need to grieve and you hear your controller saying, well, what good is that going to do? Remember this conversation because it is so good. It is the best of the things. Let it happen, right? So that's what I have for you today. Take this to heart. Let it be a part of your practice in 2025. I can't tell you how much it can change for you. Way, way more than trying to force a resolution will ever change for you. So give it a try. Or if you're doing it already, keep going because you're doing the right thing. I want to say Happy New Year to Rebecca too, and Happy New Year to all of you. as we go into this new year. Again, there's no new year, new me. We don't need any of that. This is about continuing what we're already doing, right? So Jan is saying this was incredibly helpful and insightful. Spot on. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sitting through this whole thing, probably while your controllers were like, no, 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 dissociate. You made it to the end, and it was a little bit of a longer one too. So great job. And I look forward to seeing you and working more with you guys in the coming year. Thank you guys. Have a great New Year's Eve and a great start to your year. Talk to you next Tuesday.